Welcome to Downshift. My name is Matt, and this is the new dawn for Mazda. This, of course, is their new CX90, which means it's the first car that they're rolling out with their new chassis, new engine generation, and new transmission. And this particular one is the plug-in hybrid version of their big new flagship three-row SUV. And it's pretty good, but nothing's perfect. So today we're hitting the highlights, the best and the rest, starting with the rest. Now the first story we have is of course the back seat. Now this is Mazda's new generation as we talked about, and they're rolling it out with their biggest, their three-row, their flagship SUV. It's kind of a smart move, but it is still Mazda, and in typical Mazda fashion, it's kind of tight back here. The third row can be had in a 2 or 3 seat configuration, which is very generous to suggest that you could fit 3 people back here. You could fit 2 of me back here, but that's assuming that we could each put our foot into the center aisle. But really the third row is very much reserved for small children, get my point? But you still get some nice stuff back here, like vents, USB-C chargers, and a couple cup holders. Could you fit adults back here? Yeah, absolutely. Would you want to for over an hour? Maybe not. Number 2, we're talking about driver assist. This is another place that Mazda's never really historically been at the forefront, and that remains true with the new CX90. You do get a fairly comprehensive safety suite on paper. All the usual suspects are here, but with one kind of glaring omission, and that's lane centering. You do get lane keeping assist, which will kind of nudge you back into your lane, but it won't really allow you to take your hands or eyes off the road, which obviously you shouldn't be taking your eyes off the road anyway. But then you also have adaptive cruise, which on the highway is pretty good. And the only other real issue I have is kind of with the front and rear cross-traffic mitigation or cross-traffic alert, and it's very nervous. When you're approaching an intersection, when you're coming to brake at an intersection and there's any cars going past, it's gonna let you know. Overall, it's a fine system. The only thing that's kind of a bummer is the lack of lane centering assist. And number 3, we have to talk about EV mode, and this is a bit of a two-parter. First is the number of EV miles that you see on the dash isn't exactly the number of EV miles that you'll get. However, it is pretty close to the EPA range claim, about 27 miles of fully electric range. On the dash, it told me that I was gonna get 29, and I ended up getting about 26. And number 2, even in EV mode, the car feels a little jumpy, like the EV power is going through the transmission, and that's because it is. But what's more, if you drive the car around side streets at lower speed with the windows down, you'll quickly start to realize that this thing makes a lot of noises, like a lot. Number 4, we're gonna talk money. Now this, like the driver assistance point we just discussed, is kind of a Mazda staple. This is going to be more expensive, but it should be. It's more luxurious, powerful, and advanced than really any of the usual competition, like the Highlander, Pilot, or the Palisade and Telluride twins. Plus, none of those offer a PHEV model. Shoot, the Highlander is the only one to even offer a hybrid. The CX90 starts at over $47,000 for the plug-in hybrid here. It's about $40,000 for the straight 6 to start, but if you want the big power, you'll still pay over $50,000 for that straight 6. But again, you're getting something here that you're not getting anywhere else, so you kind of have to pay to play. And number 5, there's just a couple little nitpicks or small things that aren't exactly ideal going on in here. Firstly is that your infotainment is only touchscreen during Apple CarPlay or Android Auto. And secondly is that your digital cluster isn't super customizable. It's still really nice, but I just would expect a little bit more customizability. Third, your trunk is okay size, and you don't really have any underfloor storage, and that's largely due to the fact that you have a battery under there. And then in your second row, you have a huge hump and a silly center cup holder thing that kind of folds, and I can see that getting broken with kids pretty easily. And then your center console up front is enormous and takes up a huge amount of the cabin for not really a whole lot of practicality trade-off wise. And then up from there, you do have physical controls for your climate controls, which is great, and you push down on the toggle for cold, but I kind of want to push up on the toggle for hot. This is probably just a me issue, but just something I noticed. You also don't really have anything in the way of ambient light, which I think is a little bit of a miss despite the rest of the luxurious cabin in here. But with all those things out of the way, let's talk about all the great stuff going on in here. Number 1 is the plug-in hybrid thing here. Like I mentioned before, you're not getting a plug-in hybrid from any of the other three-row competitors in this field. So from the jump, you have an exclusive and class-leading thing right here. And it's pretty awesome. You get about 26, 27 miles-ish of fully electric range, which is probably enough to get most people at least to work, maybe to and from work. The electric motor is integrated between the engine and the transmission and then goes to all 4 wheels. So like we mentioned before, before, you're gonna feel some of those shifts even while in EV mode. So if you're used to driving a normal EV with just single speed, it's gonna be a little bit different here. In terms of power, we're talking about 323 horsepower and 369 pound-feet. So this thing is absolutely not slow. And then there's the whole charge target thing, which is really, really cool. We basically took this car up to my parents' cottage this weekend. It's about 120 miles away. We burned through all of the EV range, and then we left charge target on. So the car recharged itself, and it charged itself enough in that time for us to completely use another almost 25 miles of fully electric. So it's really, really cool, and you don't even really have to plug it in, although to get the max efficiency, you'll probably want to do that. So ultimately, is it perfectly smooth? No, not really. It's a little clunky, it needs a little finessing, but as a whole, it's a great system, and it's a huge benefit to have where no one else is bringing this sort of technology here. So Mazda's going to suss it out, refine it over the next year, and it's going to be a very, very good system very quickly. And number two, another thing that's fitting with typical Mazda fashion is it looks pretty good. It looks expensive. The color looks rich with the artisan red here, and it's tastefully chromed out. The grille is active for aero and efficiency, and the running lights bleed into the grille in a really cool and unique way. And then around the side, the CX90 gets the first 21-inch wheels ever on a Mazda, and they look great. And then there's the chrome running bar at the top of your window treatments, and the chrome running bar in the rocker panel that has Mazda etched into it near the back. Then around the back, the tailgate looks a little bulby, but still classy. You've got interesting taillights and several chrome badges and no exhaust tips. And that stays true for the straight six as well. I think it's really handsome, and I love this spec, especially with the new artisan red paint. Very, very nice. And number three, we're talking about the drive in general. Again, in typical Mazda fashion, this thing drives pretty well. It's the new rear-wheel drive first chassis, but all CX90s come with all-wheel drive standard. It feels solid, it feels refined, it feels expensive, and yes, it does feel maybe a little bit BMW. You've got gobs of power, and the electric and gas work together pretty well. There's a little bit of sound, but if you have music on, you're probably not going to hear a transition. And speaking of that, you do have the new 8-speed transmission, which overall is pretty good. The steering has a nice weight and feel to it, as you're used to expecting from a Mazda. And the suspension is supple enough to be comfy, but firm enough to take a corner if you really want to. And this, I would say ultimately this and the Honda Pilot are probably the best driving vehicles in this segment. The difference is this does a lot of other things really well besides just driving. And number four, we're going to talk about interior design. And once again, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but it's true. Everything in here is very typical Mazda. And what I mean by that is you have some of the more elaborate and upscale materials that you'll find in the segment paired with a very elegant and very much class-leading and very impressive design. I would even go so far as to say the interior here feels mostly Mazda, but with a touch of Lexus. The design is beautiful and minimal, with a simple soft dash design with gold stitching and piping that's accented with textured looking silver trim, and the gold is everywhere. It's on the seats, it's on the dash, it's on the outboard vents, even in the rear seats. And then there's the center console. It looks great. It's got a wireless charger, shifter, all your controls, and a storage cubby. But it does seem like it takes up quite a bit of space for the practicality that it brings. But you know what else takes up space that I'm totally fine with? The physical climate controls on the dash. Way to go, Mazda. It's another classically gorgeous Mazda interior, and you can get it in white. You already know that's how I'd have mine. And this one's not equipped with it, but each Mazda CX90 has a pretty healthy 5,000 pound towing capacity. It's not bad. And number seven, you know what else is luxurious? Technology features that make your life easier. Things like wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, a Mazda first fully digital instrument cluster that looks pretty brilliant, by the way, and then another Mazda first, a fully digital rear view mirror, which is really nice, especially if you've got all the headrests up in the third row, and you have a really big 12-inch infotainment screen. Weirdly though, it's only touchscreen in Apple CarPlay. Maybe Android Auto too, I haven't tested that, but if you want to use the Mazda native UI, you got to use the Mazda wheel down here, which to me personally is not really a problem. I actually kind of like to use it. Another thing though that's really nice is the 360 cameras here. And they even stay on once you've started to move forward up to 10 miles an hour. That's a really underrated feature. I mean, some of these things are just nice and things that you don't get from every other three-row. Nice job, Mazda. Number six, we're talking about luxe stuff. This doesn't just look better than everything else on sale. It's It's also got the features to back it up. Here you have things like heated and cooled seats up front, a heated steering wheel, and your second row is heated and can be cooled if you want. And you have a nice panoramic roof. Plus there's other things like the hands-free tailgate and the big screens and all the other real luxe touches that we've already talked about. And eighth and finally, we're going to talk about the second row. Now, while the third row isn't exactly palatial, the second row here is very comfortable for myself at 6'1". The seats here slide and recline. They get out of the way manually and quickly, and they're heated and can be cooled. You get shades back here, you get your own climate zones and vents. But you know what's weird? There's no cup holders on the back of the front center console. So Mazda made this cheap little fast food takeout tray thing with a couple cup holders on it. And I think I just see it getting broken pretty quickly by a kid's foot. Honestly, this little thing is the cheapest feeling thing in here, which says a lot of nice things about the rest of the car. So let's talk about the final thoughts. So that's the best and the rest of the Mazda CX90. It does have a couple little faults here and there, like the tiny third row, the kind of skinny trunk, and the less than robust driver assistance suite. But aside from that, I am thoroughly impressed with this thing. It is luxurious, it's efficient, it's pretty advanced, and I just like it. So again, well done Mazda, and thanks for letting me have a go. We'll see you in the next one.